Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of start talking with some background information here as folks get settled in. So thank you very much for coming today. I think this is our biggest turnout for one of these workshops that we've done so far. So we really appreciate you all making the time to come over here and then be disappointed by not having lunch. So apologies there. I'm going to talk through the main options for importing publications into Activity Insight, which is our new faculty activity reporting platform. So we're going to cover several different options, and then we'll focus on one a little bit more in depth at the end. You're welcome to follow along and do this process as we go. I'm going to use myself as a guinea pig today, but I may reach out for a couple of sample disciplines since my library and information science research doesn't show up very well in PubMed, for example. I'm joined today by my colleague Sharon Goodall, who is managing the implementation of Activity Insight, her GA Ankit, whose last name I don't remember, I'm sorry. And then our Research Commons GA, Zayden Tathong, who will be teaching part of the workshop as well. So I've jotted down a few resources up here on the whiteboard. My handwriting is notoriously pretty terrible, but the first one is the site that I have on the screen up here now, which is the Faculty Activities Data portal on the Faculty Affairs website. So it's faculty.umd.edu/data. And this is where you can go to log into Activity Insight and also to access all of the supporting information that's been compiled. So the training session schedules, but also the user guides. So you definitely want to make note of this page. I also want to call your attention to our online resource guide that we've put together specifically for importing publications. And so that address is lib.guides.umd.edu/AI prep for Activity Insight. And so this goes over the major resources that are integrated or that you can export from and import into Activity Insight from. Okay? So that's the plan for today. Sharon does have to run off to another meeting, so before she leaves around 1:20-ish, we'll pause for questions because she really does have the most familiarity with Activity Insight, and then we'll continue on from there. Okay? So you can feel free to interrupt with questions at any point. This is designed to be pretty informal, so that is our plan for today. Okay, does anybody have any questions at this point? All right, we'll go for it then. Okay, so I am going to log into my Activity Insight account. And to do that, I'm on the Faculty Affairs data site. Yes?
Are we all going to have to make accounts? Would it be worth our while to set up an account now?
So if you are a tenure or tenure track faculty member, you should already have an account, and you should be able to just log in with your director ID and password.
Okay, great.
So hopefully that's what happens right now. You will also need to multi-factor authenticate, which is one of my personal favorite pastimes here at the University of Maryland. But fortunately today I brought my phone, so I can actually do so. Okay. All right, so I have logged in with my directory ID and password. And you will end up at this page when you arrive. And so there's a large number of different screens where you can view and also enter information as it regards your activity as a faculty member here. We are going to focus on the research, scholarly, creative, and/or professional activities section where it says publications. Okay, so I will click publications. And this is what it looks like the first time you log in. Okay, so I have no publications added. there's this nice little sentence here that says you can import from other platforms, and then this links to our online resource guide that I just shared. So you do have access to that later on as well. So of course you can add things manually. If you only have a few publications, or if you don't feel that your publications are well represented in online databases. Is anybody here from the performing arts? Okay. So if you have things that you don't think will be available in other online platforms like Google Scholar or some of the databases that we're going to show, it may be faster to just enter them manually. So that's always an option. It gives you all of these different types of screens where you can choose contribution type, and we have tried to capture a wide variety of potential types of scholarly output. And there is also an other type that you can then explain if you feel like there's something in there that doesn't capture your work. You can fill out these different elements of your citation, basically, indicate whether it was peer reviewed. You can mark things as invited. You can add a short description, and then enter your authors. Okay? So this is sort of the standard, type your stuff in. You could copy and paste, say if you have a Word version of your CV. But there are a number of other ways that you can import publications as well. Yes?
What does it mean if you just have like 6 random articles already in there that I'm pretty sure I didn't do?
Sharon?
We, as part of the implementation of the platform, we tried to bring in some records from Literati,
Okay.
and so that
That makes sense.
Okay.
Oh, I have the same thing, but there's like a ton of errors in that maybe it's just a Literati thing.
That is a Literati thing. Yeah. So we try not to say Literati out loud too often, just because of the reaction that it engenders in a crowd. But you may recall Literati. We did actually try to export and clean as much of that data as possible. But there were reasons why we canceled Literati, right? And the data integrity was not super awesome, so you may notice some errors in there. It may be easier to start fresh. It may be easier to just fix a couple things. But hopefully this way you will have a number of different options to get your stuff in there. So thank you. Yeah.
You just said a moment ago that you can put in all this information about each publication. Are we required to do that? And if so, why? This is going to take weeks again, just like Literati did, only to have it cancelled. I don't understand why we're even doing that. I know it's not your fault, so I apologize for the tone of voice. But I mean, are we really expected to put all those things in for each publication we have? If we have, as I'm sure lots of people here do, 150, 200 publications, this could take weeks to do.
So I will not address any of the larger
I apologize.
decision, just because it's, as you can imagine, a number of levels above my pay grade.
Yeah.
But what I can say is that hopefully some of the strategies that we'll show for importing will mean that it doesn't take weeks. I agree that if you had to type in 150 different publications like this, it would be
Do
real
we have to
tricky.
enter all of that information about each one?
So the idea is that the university and the system, so the system is the one who has instituted a number of these reporting requirements. So there's certain things that they want to be able to keep track of, and that includes things like number of peer-reviewed articles. So as you can imagine, a lot of these won't apply to different things, right? So if it's part of a larger work, that doesn't get filled in.
All this stuff about city and state and publisher and so forth, do they really want that information?
I think of it as like what I would put in a citation on my CV. So if that is in a regular citation format, then I could see why it would make sense to enter it here. Okay? So we'll go ahead. Of course, you could spend some more time sorting through this, seeing if it makes sense for you to enter things manually. But we're going to talk more about how you can do this a little bit more automatically to avoid some of this manual work.
So you need to add every author's name there.
Right, so I'm assuming some of you may have a paper or two that has like 40 authors or something. So this is designed to represent your output. So I'm assuming that you would be one of those authors, and that would be a good place to start. But if you wanted to show up as a full citation on a CV, for example, then yes, it would be beneficial to enter all of them. And hopefully most of them will get imported over, okay? All right, I'm trying to avoid coming down with the cold that my children had, so I'm just sucking on cough drops here. Okay, so we're gonna cancel this, and yes, I would like to leave it. Which brings us back to this page where you have these options to import, right? So we click import, and first I'm gonna focus on the import from a third party side over here. And so these are built into Activity Insight. So you don't have to do any importing or exporting. And these are the 4 main databases that are included directly in Activity Insight. So the options are Web of Science, Crossref, which is a very broad selection of publications. Crossref is the body that assigns DOIs to works. So if it has a DOI or is another type of official publication, say with an ISBN or something like that, you're likely to find it in Crossref. Orchid, how many folks here have an Orchid profile? A few, okay. So we could talk about Orchid and how it can integrate into Activity Insight. And then the last option is PubMed. So do we have folks whose publications are indexed in PubMed?
Can you tell us what they are, if they're humanities or science?
So Web of Science is mostly science and social science. Crossref has a little bit better humanities coverage. It's definitely broader. Orchid, you enter the publications yourself, so it can be as broad as you elect it to be. And then PubMed is primarily public health and medicine and adjacent fields. Yeah.
How about Scopus?
So Scopus is an option, but since the University of Maryland no longer has a subscription to it, it doesn't integrate directly. That said, you can, let me see. Nope. You may come across in Orchid, you can actually import your publications directly from Scopus, and then you could link your Orchid up with Activity Insight. So that's a roundabout way at this point, unless anybody wants to raise a whole bunch of money that we could resubscribe to Scopus too. That would be great as well. Okay, so I'm just gonna walk through how these work quickly. So you can see it's already filled out my name and then roughly my years of activity when it comes to publications. And it can be really helpful to specify this. I am fortunate in that my full name is pretty uncommon, but if you happen to be John Smith or another similar name, you may find others' works in here and you're like, I don't want to see this. I only want to see the stuff that I've done. So I'm going to go ahead and search Web of Science for my publications. Okay, so I have found 5. I will go ahead and just take a quick look at them to make sure that, yes, these are all me. It does include those items that have multiple authors, so that's been taken care of automatically. And so what I'll do here is I will click to select all and say continue. All right, and so it does give me a chance to review these before I bring them over. It has, like, it's not going to have a PubMed ID because it's not in PubMed, right? So there are a number of fields that are left blank that you might just want to double check that everything looks to be pretty good. You can do that for each one, or you can go ahead and just say, I trust it, it looks close enough to me, and hit finish import. Thank you. I'm going to load these 5 publications. Yes?
I'm sorry, I missed how to mark them, how to select them, or what do you do?
Let me
Also,
just...
I actually have too many items to display.
So that happened to me the other day when I was only searching with my last name and first initial, and a number of them were not my publications. So that is a danger that you have to watch out for here, is that identifying authors is a challenge, right? Librarians have been fighting with this stuff for years and years and years to try to figure out how to make sure that it is the John Smith that you are thinking of. And so if there's anything that has a remotely similar name, it could think that it's yours and bring it in. So you do have to double check this stuff. So you should see a little check box on the, okay. And so that little checkbox right there will select all, or you could select them individually. So I have imported 5 publications at this point. I'm going to go ahead and keep working on this because I know I have more than 5. So I'm going to go ahead and try Crossref and see if I can get more from there so I don't have to type anything in. So again, it pulls in my years of activity primarily. And I'm going to go ahead and click search. And we'll hope that there's no terrible internet disturbance or something today. Although that is prone to happening when you're standing in front of large groups.
With the camera.
With the camera. Geez, I forgot about the camera. Thanks, Sharon. I appreciate the reminder. Yeah.
So on the top it's saying displaying 64 publications, but there's not 64, and then there isn't like a next page button.
Well, it did just fail connecting to Crossref, which has not happened to me thus far. So maybe Sharon could take a look at that real quick. I'm going to give it one more shot. Nope, okay. So, as I said, this has not happened to me before, so I don't anticipate that you would have troubles with Crossref. So let's go ahead and talk briefly about...
Yeah, the only other thing I would mention is that for Crossref, and I think some of the other ones have too, there's that add search criteria underneath publication date. So each different one kind of has, maybe you already pulled that out before, a different set of ways to whittle down besides just your name and the dates.
Yep.
It might help, you never know.
Yeah, and so before we talk about Orchid, I'm just going to show you PubMed because it works similarly to Web of Science and also Crossref when it will actually load. But I, of course, have nothing published in PubMed, so would anybody mind sharing their name so I could search for them in PubMed?
R-E-D-Z-A-Y. Are you doing last name?
Yes.
R-E-D-Z-A-Y. E. I mean, E is my first name.
Okay. And we'll see how we do here. Thank you. Okay, so that's thinking.
Just did it on my computer network.
Well, that's nice. So this
I'm
is,
trying to import them now, actually, and it's kind of frozen on the stuff.
let me try all fields.
Oh,
Okay, is this,
That's only a fraction of them.
Okay.
That came up in my search, so I don't know why.
yeah. I wonder if it's arguing with itself since it's in my account and it's previously searched for Kelsey Corlett Rivera. You'd think that clearing out that field would do it, but I'm not sure. So again, it looks roughly the same. So you could go through and select the ones that were actually yours. You can select all and then choose more, and it does show all 15 on this page. Okay, so Web of Science and PubMed work roughly the same. So if one doesn't work very well, you could try the other. And then I'm going to go ahead and cancel this import because I do not want to take credit for all of your publications, or some of them, as the case may be. Okay, I do want to cancel. Thank you for double checking. Okay, So I mentioned Orchid as an option here. And I pulled up my Orchid profile just to show you all what it looks like. So there's a number of journal publishers and funders who at this point in time have started to require you to register for an Orchid before you can submit a manuscript to them or submit a proposal. So it's not a bad thing to have set up, and it does help with this author disambiguation problem. So it's a way for you to claim your publications, and also you end up with an actual ID number that you can use instead of a name that could be misinterpreted as someone else. So I have set up my also known as, which in this case is not terrible because I hyphenated my last name when I got married, but there are many other scenarios when you might want to put another name in here, especially if you happen to be from another country that perhaps doesn't use the Roman alphabet. We have a lot of issues with transliteration differences. So this can be a really good way to make sure that your presence on the internet shows your publications with your associated names. I have also, I mentioned this before, but I've hooked up my researcher ID and also my Scopus author ID. So it will connect to those other profiles. So if I click on this, you will see the publications that I have stored in Publons, which is the new owner of Researcher ID after Web of Science, and it will show my publications here as well. Okay, so Researcher ID, Scopus ID, Orchid, all of these are designed to disambiguate you from other authors, and will allow you to import your materials directly into Activity Insight. So on my Orchid profile, if I scroll down, and you're seeing the public view as I haven't logged in, there's a number of concerts papers, journal articles, posters, so a larger body of work than what was showing up in Web of Science. So in order to get this stuff pulled into my Activity Insight account, you choose Orchid. It gives you this option to create or connect your Orchid ID. You only have to do this once. From then on, it is connected. It doesn't update automatically. You still need to go in and pull in new publications, but at least you don't have to do the login process more than once. So it takes me to Orchid. My Orchid account is affiliated with the University of Maryland, which means I can log into this with my director ID and password, and that way I don't have to remember yet another password. Okay, so since I was already logged in this browser, it just did it for me, and now I am connected to my profile, and I could choose Search Orchid. And then we get the same type of things. So, of course, I don't remember what I imported the first time. Activity Insight does do a decent job of catching duplicates. So I'm just going to say, yes, import all of these. I'll click Continue. And it's going to yell at me, right? So it says this is a duplicate. I can double check and see which citation I like more. Okay, so this one hasn't done a very good job. So I'm going to skip importing a new one and keep the original. Okay. And this one did a little bit better, so I'll import the new one, and same for that. Okay. All right. So I've made my choices there, and I will go ahead and say Continue. Okay, and I'm going to finish. I want to import all of the other things. And I'm more confident about this because I'm the one who entered them on my Orchid profile to begin with. Okay, and so now I have all of these publications in my Activity Insight account. And I dare say that was faster than me copying and pasting or typing what I have entered so far. Yeah.
It's just been, like, I've been unable to get to past the import stage. Like I was going through the duplicates, and the last duplicate, said import, and it's just kind of.
So that just happened to me as well, and I just clicked continue, and it went ahead. So if you scroll up to the top, yeah, it's not very intuitive design. However, you would expect something to happen when you click that last button for sure. It's like red, right? Yeah. So we also have made a number of suggestions to Digital Measures by Watermark, who is the company who runs this thing, about stuff like this. So we do take feedback and send it back to them. And they have implemented some of our suggestions. So it hasn't all been for naught. Okay. So those are the different built-in publication options, okay? There are also a number of other platforms that exist out in the world that will keep track of publications like this. I'm going to go back into my publications. And you can also export from another platform and import into Activity Insight with a BibTeX file. So some examples of those are shown over here on the left, okay? So if you are tracking publications with any of these platforms, so Mendeley, Zotero, Google Scholar, you can export from those platforms and then import as a BibTeX file. So do any folks in here have an active Google Scholar profile? Okay. So I pulled up my Google Scholar profile. I have all of my publications listed here. Most of these were slurped in automatically when I created my profile. And when I have new publications come out, they do show up automatically in Google Scholar.
Sorry, I don't have a profile, but I have a lot of stuff in Google Scholar.
Okay. So if you wanted to create a profile, it's a good way to get a first import of all of your publications. It can be a little bit tricky to export individual items down the road. Like let's say you finished everything for 2019, you logged in to update your profile for 2020. While it looks like you can select individual titles here, we've determined that there is a bug so that those do not so it exports everything every time instead of just individual titles. So we do have a proposed workaround for that, but I like to give folks a heads up because it is not expected behavior. So for that reason, I switched over to using Zotero to manage my publications. I also use it for most of my own writing projects. Mendeley is another good option. It could be that in your departments you use EndNote. That's another popular reference manager. But and Zayden's going to talk a little bit more about this in a second. But you can export as a BibTeX. It's much easier to sort and select individual files from here. So maybe, I find it yeah.
But wouldn't it be better in that case if our activity thing sorts out duplicates, to simply ignore the profiles and all of that, and to just upload the whole thing every year and have activity sorted out?
So the danger there is that you will probably find things that were not written by you in your Google Scholar profile.
But even from something like Google Scholar.
So Google Scholar, their algorithms are amazing, right? And they have a lot of money to invest in them, but they still bring up items that were not necessarily written by you. And they can include those automatically. So, and because of the volume of Google Scholar, you might end up with like 300-400 items, and it can be really difficult to go through and check those.
So what would be the least time-intensive way to provide what's needed for the activity?
So our proposal here is to, let's say if you have some sort of profile, right? You might have an Orchid profile, you could set up a Google Scholar profile to begin with, and then export that as a BibTeX file, use that as your first and initial upload into Activity Insight, but also import it into Zotero so that you can track in my publications. And then it makes it much easier to just go in and add individual publications to your Zotero account, which also gives you this lovely profile, which I'll see if I can get to quickly. And I went over that really, really quickly, but Zayden's gonna walk through it step by step here in a few.
So how do we get to Zotero? Oh, go to import, there it is.
I think this is me, sorry. So I pulled up all of these profiles before you guys got here. There I am. Okay, so this is automatically generated by Zotero based on what I have in that folder. And so I was able to enter a nice bio. It shows the public groups that I'm a part of. I can put a website, and then it does a really nice categorization of all of my publications. So for me, it's worth it to get this public profile and also have a nice way to keep track of my publications. Okay? So I want to take a quick break right now just to make sure if there's any activity insight specific questions, we could pose those to Sharon before she has to take off. And then Zayden's going to take over to show you the nuts and bolts for how to do this export-import business with BibTech and Zotero.
My administrator couldn't be here today, and so she asked me to fill in. In Literati, she as a staff person could view all of our faculty. So how do we set that up for her with this system?
So whoever is in charge of that unit, or a chair or a dean, needs to use at the very bottom of the screen that you're on there, the faculty.umd.edu/data. There's a grant proxy access form. Chairs and deans have access to those faculty within their area, and they can delegate someone to have that access as well. So they need to actually give that permission through use of that form. So then it gets submitted to our team, and we'll set that up.
Okay, so each individual faculty member doesn't have to grant the proxy. The chair of the department can grant the proxy for all of the faculty in the department.
So, and that's for being able to view the information and generate reports, but there is the ability for faculty, if they have someone that is able to support them, they could grant proxy access, and that person would be able to actually manage their activity data. And that would have to be a one-on-one. Each faculty member would, whoever is granting access needs to give the permission because it is HR data that is in the system.
Okay, all right, I understand.
Good.
Thank you.
And so that button shows up at the bottom of the faculty activity data page.
And it's a Google form. Sometimes that can be problematic with it tries to authenticate you. If that doesn't work, then there's also a Word document there that can be printed, signed, and scanned back to the team. That works as well.
Okay.